So it's still cold here. Elsewhere, though, it is starting to turn milder. Temperatures in the south could reach 20 degrees Celsius, and it will turn milder even in northern Scotland by the time we get to Sunday and Monday. A mixture this weekend of lengthy dry and bright periods, but some heavy showers.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and it is 6 o'clock. Coming up tonight, the nurses, the planned strike for this weekend, no more, not to the extent it was supposed to be because the government has won its challenge in the court. The RCN leader, though, the union leader, she says it is one of the darkest days in the negotiations of the strikes. Now, before you all start shouting at me, I want to make my point clear. Yes, I support a pay rise for our hard-working nurses, but I think the way that the RCN are going about things now is absolutely wrong. Where do you stand on it all? And in this country, do you think we should be doing more or less drilling for oil and gas? There will be a legal challenge now to some of the government's plans. What says you? And the King's coronation. Should Sinn Féin be invited? Should they be in attendance? That has divided opinion. And when it comes to children doing wrong, and the wrong I want to focus on tonight is the horrific bullying that goes on, which is then filmed and shared far and wide on social media. devastating the lives of children. Where does the book stop for this? I am saying it's you, the parents. If you cannot control your children, if you cannot raise them to be decent human beings, then you will be on the hook for it. I reckon you should get charged if your child does such things. What do you make to it all? Your thoughts on it all? But before we get into it, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you. Good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight. The Foreign Secretary says the government's continuing to assist British nationals in leaving Sudan. He's urged them to make their way to the airport for evacuation as soon as possible. Meanwhile, British forces are racing to rescue as many people as they can before the ceasefire ends at midnight tonight. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the focus is currently on extending that ceasefire. He hopes there'll be more information in the coming hours. More than 897 British citizens have been flown to safety on 8 UK flights, with the government saying that number will rise. And 16,000 people are thought to have fled the country across the border into Egypt, including 14,000 Sudanese. James Cleverly says the UK is now looking into assisting countries with no diplomatic presence in Sudan.
For those on the ground, as you would expect, we are prioritising those in greatest need through allocating seats based on vulnerability, starting with families with children, the elderly, the disabled, or people with documented medical conditions. We have been notifying British nationals registered with us about the evacuation flights, as well as announcing them through our travel advice and also through organic social media networks of British nationals in Sudan.
Foreign Secretary James Cleverly there. Now, a murder investigation has been launched into the death of a pregnant teacher in Glasgow. Morel Sturrock was found dead on Tuesday morning. She was 29 weeks pregnant. Her baby didn't survive. There's a manhunt underway now for her fiancé, David Yates. His car was found at Moogdock Country Park, where police are now focusing their search. The RMT union has announced workers across 14 trade operators will walk out on the 13th of May. They've rejected their latest pay offer. The General Secretary, Mick Lynch, claims the rail delivery group has now reneged on their original proposal, offering 5% increase if the union ends industrial action. And earlier, ASLEF said its train drivers are planning 3 new strike dates after turning down a 4% pay rise. They're scheduled across May and June, with one of the days coinciding with the FA Cup final. The Royal College of Nursing has been forced to cut short strike action planned for this weekend after the government won a legal challenge. The High Court ruled that part of their 48-hour walkout on Tuesday would be unlawful, as the RCN's 6-month mandate for strike action would have run out the day before. Nurses have been protesting outside the court, some signs reading, "Nurses being silenced is silencing patients." The RCN's General Secretary, Pat Cullen, says the government's lost the trust now of nurses and the public.
This is the darkest day in this dispute so far. Any government that would drag their nursing staff through the courts, they've won their legal battle today, but what this has led to is they've lost nursing and they've lost the public. They've taken the most trusted profession through the courts by the least trusted people.
Cullen speaking there. Well, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary for Health, Maria Caulfield, says she's hopeful negotiations will now be able to start.
We recognise that every day of strike has an impact on patients. It's outpatient appointments cancelled, tests cancelled, operations cancelled, and absolutely, we don't want to stop the right to strike, but it has to be done in a legal way, and that's why the Secretary of State took the action he did. Hopefully, we can then get people back around the table, particularly the RCN, to try and come to a resolution overall.
Schools in England are facing disruption today as tens of thousands of teachers have gone on strike. National Education Union members have walked out over pay. Year 11 and Year 13 classes, they say, are being prioritised, with exams just weeks away. But more strikes have been announced for the summer after union members rejected the government's pay offer. The government's unveiled the biggest shake-up of gambling laws in 15 years. It says it aims to redress the power balance between punters and operators. Checks to better protect even those unable to afford small losses are among their plans, as well as maximum stakes for online slot machines. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Fraser, says the laws need updating.
The last time we made gambling changes in 2005, and gambling has changed so significantly since then. It used to be all land-based gambling, and now with the advent of the internet, everyone now has a smartphone in their pocket and they've basically got a casino which is available to them 24/7. So it's really right that we bring in these groundbreaking changes, really significant measures, in order to bring gambling up to the technological age.
US talk show host Jerry Springer has died at the age of 79. He was a prominent figure on American TV networks for nearly 3 decades, best known for showcasing everyday family dramas on his show. Television was his second career, though. He'd previously been a politician and served as mayor of Cincinnati. The British-American passed away peacefully at his home in Chicago. Jerry Springer, who's died at the age of 79. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Kevin Craig, a former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR, and Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a former Brexit Party MEP. Are you a candidate for reform or anything these days?
Well, not in the forthcoming elections, but
right.
I did say I would stand in the general election.
Right, well, there you go. All about the politics here. By the way, Jerry Springer, very sad news there. I don't know if I'm like the only person in the land that's never seen a Jerry Springer show. Have you?
I have. It was a long time ago. It was the last one I saw. I think it must have been about 20 years ago.
Have you ever watched Jerry Springer?
Of course, yeah.
Have you?
Yeah, he was a trailblazer for the genre of controversial chat shows.
And he was great.
Yeah.
He brought life.
I thought you'd only watched one.
Well, no, I haven't seen one for 20 years.
Oh, right.
I believe he was a sound democratic politician in his day in the States. I might have that wrong, but good political credentials.
I have
Got that in there straight away.
Very, no messing up. Quick out the traps there. There you go. I've never seen a single episode. But I know, yeah, there you go. I've not lived. I maybe might spend my whole weekend catching up on Jerry Springer. I won't really. Anyway, you know the drill, don't you? What is your thoughts on all of the goings-on of the day? Get in touch with me. gbviews at gbnews.uk is my email, or you can tweet me at gbnews. First up, though, I want to talk to you. By the way, lots of you getting in touch about not my top story, but a story I will get to before the end of the programme, which is feral kids and whose responsibility is it? I blame firmly and squarely the parents. One of my viewers already says, why don't you blame successive governments for forcing all the mothers out to work instead of allowing them to stay home and raise their children? She says, I can't point the finger at parents when they have to go out to work. Well, I've got to say, I work full-time and I would still take responsibility for my child's behaviour. It doesn't matter if I wasn't there all day, every day. The buck would stop with me as his mother. But I'm sure you won't be shy to tell me if you disagree. Right, it's our top story, the nurses. We've seen the goings-on of the day there. Planned long strike over the bank holiday weekend. Long story short, they've had that basically cut in half. This has all gone to the High Court. And I have to say... Right, so I want to make this point because I know I will get in trouble from people at home and maybe on this panel for my views, but my mum and sister are nurses, you all know this, and for the record, I want medical professionals to be paid well. I don't think we pay them enough. I would like to see them all, including my own family, get pay rises, but there is a but. I do think the way that the RCN are going about things is wrong. I see Pat Cullen, Kevin. She's on the steps of the court today. She's saying, you know, this is one of the darkest days. She's talking about the government bullying the heroes that we all went out and clapped for. And I just think that's divisive claptrap, really. I think that if Pat Cullen doesn't understand the rules as to what the striking ballots are, then perhaps she shouldn't be leading that union. She knew full well, or she should have done, that actually you have 6 months since the point of ballot to do your strikes, and And then, yes, you can continue striking, but you have to reballot your members. So I actually think the fact that this was allowed to go to court is just a sign that these strikes are now getting weaponised as a political football. I don't want my family's livelihoods and the livelihoods of similar to be a political football. I want this to be a good faith negotiation from all parties. What say you?
I say I'm surprised that you're more worried about the RCN losing a legal case on a technicality.
No, they didn't lose it on a technicality. They lost it
down the
because...
pub. It was a technicality that the strikes, the period that the strikes could have gone on for would have come in a day before the current action was due to end.
Yes, but right, ultimately, I sympathise with my sister, my mum and all of their colleagues. I want them. I need to repeat myself because otherwise I get lambasted for being an awful, awful human being.
That's too much.
Doesn't want nurses to be paid. I do. Right? But at the same time, I also want everyone else that pays taxes and expects a certain level of service from the NHS to receive a decent service.
Agreed.
If you don't have frameworks around these strikes, literally anyone will be out all the time, God knows how long, on strike, and then the public will really suffer. So I think that actually the framework of strikes has to be respected. And it wasn't a technicality, it was the framework which had been set in place that everybody was aware of.
It's a fundamental deadline.
Hang on, guys.
Yes,
I haven't actually got in.
I know, sorry, go on.
You've gone again. You've gone again. You've gone again.
You'll wait till you get
so,
the
right.
kids one.
So the thing here is, what most viewers and listeners, I reckon, will get really angry about is that in our country, over £8 billion is spent a year by the NHS on agency nurses, and most viewers and listeners, I reckon, want, like you, that money to go into the pockets of amazing nurses like your family. So I reckon that most people, as Keir Starmer said quite nicely earlier on this channel, are more bothered about why the government took so long to talk to nurses and when they're going to resolve the dispute. And it was an interesting priority that they focused on this case instead of more discussions to try and bring a new offer in that the members might support.
But if they don't, I mean, I'm so sorry, because I want to bring you in.
You know a lot about. He knows a lot about losing. He knows loads about losing legal cases. Ask him.
Oh,
he's an expert.
Kevin Craig,
he is.
Well, he's getting right in there.
Well, he does.
Boxing gloves, ding ding. I'm going to be like an unofficial ring girl tonight. Right, go Ben.
Before he gets going, I thought I'd get in.
Yeah, go on.
Right. That just fires me up. It doesn't stop me. That actually just, gives
I know.
me more momentum.
I'm waiting.
But I think Pat Cullen has handled this with great ineptitude. The entire strike. She started off with an outrageous claim of 19%. And I looked askance at that when they put out a 19% figure. Inflation had been 10%. Yes, they've been underpaid for many years. Yes, they deserve a significant rise, and I'm completely with you. And at the outset of these strikes, my sympathy was entirely with the public sector workers who had been underpaid, including the Royal College of Nurses, particularly the Royal College of Nurses, who haven't ever striked before. But to go out of the stalls on a 19% demand was bound to put the government into a box. They were not going to come out and engage with a ridiculous figure like that. So that was her opening stall, and she got that completely wrong. Then she got it completely wrong on the other end of the extreme when she accepted a 5% wage increase and a £1,700 bonus, which was de minimis by comparison to what she should have stood for, and even smaller by comparison to her initial figure. And then to go out on a 2-day strike, and you're quite right, Michelle, it's not a technicality, it's a fundamental aspect of their right to strike. It ends after 6 months, and to go out on a 2-day strike with one of those days falling on the other side of the deadline is inept. And what she's done, she might think she's got the media on her side because she's on the steps of the court accusing this rapacious government of having another one over these hard-working nurses. But actually what she's done is given the government an upper hand because they've taken her to court and they've won. And that is not a good look. This lady probably needs to be sacked. The only thing I can say in her defence is that the Royal College of Nurses has never been on strike before.
They have, but they've never had a big national strike like this. So they did strike, I think it was in Northern Ireland, I think it was about 2019, there or thereabouts. I'm going off my memory here, which is a bit sketchy these days. They've never had like a big national strike to this extent.
Anyway, they're clearly not capable of managing this strike. And She needs to go. I think she needs to go as head of the union.
She needs to stay in post and keep telling everybody in this country that will listen that we are spending over 8 billion quid a year on agency nurses, which should go to the likes of Dewbs' family members.
Yes, but I want... so just to be clear, because I am...
She's lost the fight, hasn't she?
Well, hang on.
She's lost her members. She failed to get a good settlement. She was then overturned by her members, and now she's lost in court. 3 failures. And she hasn't delivered a result for the nurses.
Look, it's unfortunate for her that there was this technical legal ruling, and it was very difficult.
Why do you keep calling it a technical legal ruling?
Because most people down the pub will go, anyway, what about, never mind the details about that technical ruling, are the nurses back on strike? When are they back in work?
Do you know what I would say to my mate down the booze? If my mate said to me, oh, Michelle, banging on about technicalities,
say 8 billion quid,
Michelle. I'd say to my mate, listen, right, you don't get what you're on about, because it's not a technicality, it is a fundamental principle of the strike framework. And if you just let that fundamental principle go on this one, what you're going to do, you're just going to have everyone striking all over the place for as long as they want, in however format they want. And then it will be absolute carnage. So I support people's rights to strike, albeit actually I would make a better provision for emergency services. But anyway, I support the right to strike, but I also support the right of the taxpayer to receive the care that we are paying for. And if Pat Cullen is so passionate about her mandate, her remit and all the rest of it, reballot your members, and actually, you know, what's your problem? Because you'll get all of your buy-in, all of your turnout, and on you go.
Well, she's obviously, and the leadership are going to try and get to a place where the members will vote through what the leadership want them to accept. But the fact is, the government has so mishandled this that the members they just had enough. You know, and they do. If you put...
No, come on.
No, hang on. Let me finish. I haven't interrupted you tonight, Ben. The billions of pounds are being paid to agency. Sort it out, government.
Yeah, but it's not a binary choice between paying agency workers and settling the strike action with a fair pay settlement. What we've got here, and I think the argument that Michelle... Sorry, I'm sort of jumping to your defence. The argument Michelle is making is you've got a head of the union who's getting it wrong, who's breaking the law, who's not sticking by her remit, who's failed to deliver a deal.
Well, I actually think she's failing those nurses that she's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
Because she's got a cost settlement awarded against her of about 35 grand. The subs to get into this union are about 16 quid there or there, about 16.50 a month. So she's now taken the subs of 2,000 odd nurses and gone into fighting these legal costs.
And she didn't... A lawyer didn't even attend on behalf of the RCN because they knew they were going to...
Well, listen, the great thing is, right, in the trade union movement, you can sack your leaders. They have to be elected. So the great thing is, it's not like a big property company that's value halves in 5 years, for example, where, you know, you can't immediately sack the chief executive or the chairman, but that you can sack trade union leaders.
Well, look, I just want my...
You can sack the chief executive of a property company as well, Kevin. Nice, that's 2 punches in. I'm making a note of the score.
Who reckons I'm going to have to get my boxing gloves out by the end of this show? I think it's about 50-50 at the moment. Look, I just want the future of my mum, my sister and everyone else to be treated with respect, not to be turned into some stupid point-scoring exercise by either side. I'm really frustrated about it, as you can probably tell. David says, I was a nurse for 40 years. I think it's a disgrace that nurses are striking. He says Pat Cullen has politicised the strike action, and this is the point. I just feel like the futures of my family and everyone, all of their colleagues, is being weaponised, and I don't like it. Lynn says, I'm against nurses striking and the doctors. They've lost the sympathy for my cause. I believe there should be a no-strike clause in their contract. Ian says, doctors, nurses deserve a pay rise and, more importantly, better working conditions. No one would disagree with you, I don't think, there, Ian. I guess it's how do we get to that point? That is what I'm trying to get to tonight. Richard says, everyone that works hard deserves a pay rise and not just these heroes. Norman says, ever since its creation, the Tories have wanted to destroy the NHS, and this court ruling now means that nurses are no more than slaves. He says, I wonder who on earth is next to be pulled into that category. Bit dramatic there, Norman, but everyone's entitled to their own view. What time is it? Very quickly, before I go to a break, quickly, teachers, your thoughts. Do you support those guys on their strikes?
Yes.
Do you? Do you support teachers?
I think everyone now needs to cease striking. They need to settle their disputes. The country's economy is suffering. People are suffering. We need to move on. They can come back to the table again next year, but settle it now, get the economy moving, get us back on our feet, and then, review the situation again in 12 months.
Well, lots and lots of you getting in touch with this. It's certainly dividing your opinions. Please keep your thoughts coming in, and when I come back in two, I'll have some of them on that topic, but I also want to ask you as well, where do you stand on the whole kind of drilling for oil and gas? Do you think we should do any of it? Do you think we should do more of it? Your thoughts, because now the government will face a legal challenge, basically, when it comes to how much more drilling we can do. Your thoughts, see you in two.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
So Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Saturday nights on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
Saturday nights on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Low acceptance.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock. So I was caught off guard then. I was just about to, we was having a nice little chat about the price of RCN membership. I was just looking, £16.40 a month. Or discounted to £8.20 a month for the first year for newly qualified nurses. I think that's quite a lot of money, £16.40 a month. Anyway, what do you guys think to that whole striking nurses situation when it comes to that court case today? I was asking you. Again, you're very, very divided. Doreen says if the nurses' strike wasn't conducted legally, I don't blame the government. The nurses' strike doesn't have my support. She says now it feels like these strikes are a cynical tool to undermine the government. Lots of you are sharing that view, actually, that this does feel like it is political. And that's, you see, you know my thoughts, because I've told you them. I think, like, these people, the nurses, are the ones that they're going to suffer. They are the ones that are being weaponised in this way. Will says agency nursing should be nationalised. It's a travesty that these companies are able to bleed the NHS of money. Kevin was it was a half clap. It was a one slap to the knee clap there. Will, I think that he agrees with you. Anne says, as a nurse for many years, I think my colleagues should get back to their patients, who, after all, are the most important people in the hospital. We should never forget that. I had an ex-boyfriend, was a very wealthy man. Do you know how he made his money? Recruitment agencies on things like nurses. I could never get my head around, why isn't a government pushing these agencies and going, do you know what, you're not going to have your high levels of commission. You can have, I don't know, 5% or whatever, and if you don't want the business, jog on, we'll get other agencies. I could never get my head around why they didn't push harder on the negotiations.
Do you know what, Michelle? You should watch the Labour manifesto, because you might find that in there.
Oh, little...
You're going to legislate against free market economies, is that
No. We're going to make sure the state doesn't put unnecessary money into private pockets when it could go for the good of the nation.
What does that mean?
You're going to trust a Labour government to spend money wisely?
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we won't trust you when your share price is at 25p from 68p, Ben.
Yeah. Oh, well, ding,
nice one.
Ding, round
just saying.
You know, property, well, while we're on that, property has been through 3 years of abuse by government policy, locking us down, working from home, and now inflation rampant, interest rates up. Property's been in the eye of the storm, and of course that's going to have an effect on our share price, as it has done on the entire sector. You need to do a comparison with other property companies.
Wow.
But it's interesting. I find it really interesting that Kevin's prepared to just go straight on to the personal stuff. Next time I'm on with you, Kevin, I will make sure I've got some personal...
What's personal about the share price of your business? If you attacked without any provoking, do you trust the Labour government to spend money wisely? And I was merely saying, I'll take that question from somebody whose property company value hasn't halved in the last 5 years.
Well, so
what's personal about that? And you're a listed company, it's all out there.
You wouldn't take that question from any CEO of a listed property company at the moment, because they've all suffered over the last 3 years.
I'm on here with you. We're having a chat.
Well, the last time Labour was in office, let's just talk about the subject at hand. The last time Labour was in office, the minister on the way out left a note in the Treasury saying, sorry, the money's all gone.
Do you know the context to that note?
No, I don't know the context, but that was a note that
It was a
left.
joke. It's a tradition done by governments of all political persuasions.
Well, in this case, it was a really bad joke.
I wouldn't have written it myself. You are right. I agree with you.
You know what? I asked you guys, do you think the likelihood of me needing boxing gloves with these two are by the end of the show? I put it at 50% before the break. I put it at about 85 now, so pack it in, you two.
No, it's nothing
let's
personal.
move on to the task in hand.
But he's achieved loads in his life. There's nothing personal.
As you both have. So
There's
you're here, your peers. Pack it in. Let's move on. Let's talk oil and gas, shall we? What do you think when it comes to fracking, drilling in this country for oil and gas? The government is facing a legal challenge, basically to try and stop any further oil and gas drilling in this country. It comes from Greenpeace. They're basically saying the emissions generated by all this kind of additional drilling would violate our legal net zero commitments. What say you, Ben Habib?
Well, I mean, they do violate, potentially, our net zero commitments, as evidenced by this High Court being prepared to allow the matter to go to a judicial review. You know, this new drilling, these new drilling licences. But I think it's a terrible step that the country's taken, committing itself, binding itself into a commitment for net zero by 2050 in this manner. And you might recall this was a parting shot by Theresa May just before she left office. After she knew she was leaving office, she put it onto the UK statute books. It's that law that's being used by these people to launch a judicial review. And they're doing it at a time when, as we all know, we've got a cost of living crisis, fuel costs causing a large part of it, gas being at the heart of it, and us having an abundance of gas in the North Sea and indeed under our feet on our land. And they're throwing that away. They're throwing that away in the pursuit of a political goal which hasn't actually been convincing. The case has not been scientifically convincingly made that that is going to deliver the result that they want. And I think it's daft as brushes that we've committed the country to this net zero, by 2050, no matter what the cost. And the cost, by the way, is going to be vast.
It is, and I don't think anyone really has full sight of what those costs are going to be. Not just monetary, by the way, but changes to your lifestyles, all of our lifestyles. Kevin Craig, what do you say? on the fact whether or not, firstly, we should be doing any more oil and gas drilling, whether or not you think that this Greenpeace challenge potentially will be successful or not.
So on should we be doing any new oil and gas? No. I think it's bad for the... I know it's bad for the environment. I'm sorry, I do. It's bad for the environment. I think we as a country are wasting the opportunity that we could by really not seizing the green jobs agenda. Greenpeace are using a judicial review. So, you know, as we all know, campaigning groups use judicial review all the time to try and stop what governments are doing. I think the opportunity for this country is in clean power, in wind and solar. I do respect those also who don't agree with the net zero agenda. I do believe that if you talk about the end of the world and the planet, you also have to think about people struggling for the end of the month. But I think I'm glad that Labour will not explore new oil and gas reserves, and they're going to invest massively in green technology and jobs, which could bring new life to industrial heartlands, I think.
And would you feel confident that we can exist solely, exclusively on renewables?
I'm not sure about solely and exclusively, but that has to be the aim. But as we all know, the sun doesn't... well, don't we know it this year? The sun doesn't shine all the time. And the wind doesn't blow. The wind doesn't blow all the time. But there are ways, over time to work around
Over time, absolutely. But is this a time, right now, to be banning licences which would relieve significantly the burden on the consumer? Is this a good time to be...
It's a very fair question.
Blocking those licences?
The answer is, of course, that I don't believe, and there's a lot of evidence in this debate, that the time it takes for these new licences from exploration to become accessible power is 28 years. And I also don't think it's going to lead to any reduction in the money that the consumer pays. So that's why I'm not persuaded by that point.
But if you'd made that argument 28 years ago, and you prevailed in that argument, we would have the kind of problems we have now. It's because we haven't had joined-up thinking. A stitch in time is...
saves 9.
Saves 9, exactly. And, we're not taking the steps. What we're doing is hamstringing the country into a political commitment and then hoping the technology follows. And the cost by the Treasury, talking about the cost of it, by the Treasury's own estimate, that's going to be 1.4 trillion. And we know the Treasury typically underestimates the cost of these things. So we're talking about a massive cost for the UK to deliver a political agenda for which the science is not settled. And gas, by the way, was about to be made a clean fuel by the EU, and no doubt we would have followed suit. Gas is not that polluting. Coal, yes, perhaps. Oil, yes, perhaps. Gas isn't. And we've got an abundance of gas, and I think it is economic harakiri, short-sightedness, not to be taking advantage of. At the moment, what we've got is importing LNG at vast cost from the US because we're not tapping our own gas fields. It's lunacy.
Is it lunacy? What do you reckon? Who do you agree with? gbviews@gbnews.uk is my email address. Coming up, the coronation, King's coronation. What on earth is that? The coronation. Sinn Féin. Do you think they should be there? The leader, Michelle O'Neill. Yes or no? See you in 2. I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
Right, folks, that was a spicy one, wasn't it?
With us four, plus a special guest.
Sometimes she has to stick her foot in it. Sometimes she has to say things as they are.
Sometimes I think we should keep the refugees and send the pensioners to Rwanda. Then we'd be in a much better state.
Well, Benjamin, that is...
The Saturday 5. Saturday nights from 8. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Kevin Craig, the former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR, keeps me company, as does Ben Habib, the CEO of First Property Group and a former Brexit Party MEP. We've just been talking about fracking and the like. Adrian says net zero is a scam. He puts it in capitals, it means business. He says it should go to a referendum to ask the public if this is what they want. One of the things is that actually all this net zero stuff, it was actually in the manifestos at the 2019 elections, but firstly, I'm not sure how many people actually read these manifestos in full, and secondly, I do think that it's only kind of now that people are realising, well, actually, there's a real consequence here when it comes to net zero, when it comes to the impacts on people's lives. One of my other viewers is talking about. Do people that want to stop oil actually realise how much oil is kind of contained within the creation of many of the clothing items, etc., that people wear? I think that's an interesting point you make. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in. I want to talk about the King's coronation, though, if I may, because there's been lots of chatter and debate about who and who is not invited. One such invitee that's divided opinion is Sinn Féin's leader, Michelle O'Neill. You, Kevin, you are a dual Irish citizen, so I shall start with you. Do you think it's a good thing she's there and invited or not?
Yes, I think it's good. I think it's a sign of progress. Obviously, she should be, in normal times, the First Minister of Northern Ireland at the moment, but Stormont is suspended. And I think it's a good signal that she's trying to reach out and send a signal to the people in Northern Ireland who are not of her tradition that she respects what they think about the monarchy. And I think it's really positive, and I think it's a sort of compromise and collegiate way of being that Northern Ireland needs.
Do you agree, Ben?
I totally disagree. I think it's appalling that Sinn Féin have a representative at the coronation. This is a party that still doesn't denounce IRA terrorism. Michelle O'Neill has refused to denounce it. This is a party that wishes to break the union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and makes no bones about it. That is their stated mission. This is a party that won't even take up its seats that it has at Westminster. It holds the United Kingdom in such contempt. And I kind of looked askance at the King when he was inviting multi-faith people to what should be a Church of England event. But this, for me, really takes it beyond the pale. To have Michelle O'Neill, who holds the United Kingdom in contempt, and remember, he has been crowned as King of the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, I think it's appalling. I can't put it into words how bad I think this is. And Lady Hicks, for example, who is the daughter of Mountbatten, blown up by the IRA, and was a bridesmaid at the Queen's wedding, his mother's wedding, was not invited. That is the messaging that's going out. We are so hijacked, our political class and the institutions of this country are so hijacked that we are prepared to be browbeaten and kowtow to someone who will not denounce terrorism, who wants to break our country, and we won't honour those who stand by our country. I despair.
I despair at the lack of... how do I describe it sometimes? What you say and how you say it is so strident, and you make no mention of the fact that Northern Ireland has got a huge number of people who voted for her party. Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom and rightly should stay so until or if such time a majority of people vote to leave it. Yes, the Sinn Féin are Irish Republicans, OK? Yeah. There are, I think the First Minister of Scotland is a Republican, right? So you wouldn't have him.
I would not have a separatist at the coronation of the King of the United Kingdom.
But what if it helped try to convert them? What if they go to this coronation and then they realise?
Devolution was tried. When you feed the beast, you don't... The beast does not become docile. The beast gets fed and it becomes more aggressive. Devolution was a Labour Prime Minister's attempt to try and settle the separatist issue. All it's done is feed the beast. And the protocol is the result of threats of violence, the Northern Ireland Protocol, which I challenged in court. And by the way, I see that as a victory because the Supreme Court of this country ruled that it broke the Act of Union, the fundamental constitutional basis on which this country exists.
But you lost the case, though.
We won.
It was a victory, but you lost the case.
We won the argument, Kevin. I mean, it's surprising for me that a member of the Labour Party, in fact, the Labour Party as a whole, which advocates that people in Northern Ireland should vote for the SDLP, can call themselves in any shape or form unionists. Northern Ireland is an integral part of the United Kingdom. Indeed, without Northern Ireland, there is no United Kingdom. So to have the head of a party that wants to break the country of which our monarch is king at the coronation, I just can't understand the thinking behind it.
So you wouldn't have the woman who's been elected First Minister of Northern Ireland. You wouldn't have the leader of Scotland.
The leader of the SNP.
The SNP. And you presume... Are you even in favour still of the Good Friday Agreement?
I question the Good Friday Agreement because the principle of the Good Friday Agreement, the Belfast Agreement, was that there would be no significant change to the constitutional arrangements for Northern Ireland without cross-community consent.
Look at the lives saved. Look at the peace. Look at the lives saved. The compromise.
Well, we could have compromised with Hitler in 1939.
That's a really facetious comparison.
It's not, but we could have done it. Lives would have been saved.
Hitler was a fascist who threatened your and my freedom to sit here and argue with each other. And you're comparing Hitler with the Good Friday Agreement.
I'm not comparing Hitler with the Good Friday Agreement.
I just heard it.
No, I didn't. You were suggesting that there shouldn't be a resistance put up to a breaking of the United Kingdom because there is peace engendered by us pandering to Sinn Féin. What I'm saying, actually, is that you mustn't, at certain levels, pander. You mustn't pander to threats of violence. Absolutely.
No one's pandering to threats of violence by inviting the First Minister to the coronation.
The reason we got the Anglo-British agreement in 1985 is because it's the first time, after the Brighton bombings, Margaret Thatcher was cowed to some extent by terrorism. Then we were cowed by terrorism again and gave in to the Good Friday Agreement. And the threat of terrorism from Leo Varadkar resulted in the protocol being agreed.
There were terrorists on all sides. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there were terrorists on all sides, loyalist, Republican. There was violence. The British Army, and I love Britain, I love our military, but the British Army shot dead innocent civilians in Bloody Sunday. There was terror and tragedy on all sides.
Absolutely.
And the Good Friday Agreement, by compromise, made peace.
What it did was forgive terrorism and hold unionists to account. It was iniquitous in the way that it was put in place. And by the way, unionists saw the Good Friday Agreement as a peace settlement. The Republicans and the Nationalists didn't. They saw it as a bridgehead for further concessions. And what we've seen and what we've experienced, and Sinn Féin's presence at the coronation symbolises it, is a hardening of that position. The unionists are being sat on by Westminster, being sat on by the institutions in this country, and succour is being given to separatists, and that's abomination for me.
I'll just say that 69% of people in Northern Ireland think that the Windsor framework should be given a go and would make things better. 66% of people want Stormont to come back.
I don't know where you get these
Queen's
stats.
University opinion poll, right?
Yeah, Queen's University. Well, there you go.
Well, there you go. I will leave you to make your own minds up at home as to who you agree with, or maybe neither. Maybe you've got a completely separate view. Your thoughts, GBviews at gbnews.uk. I want to talk, though, about unruly kids, in particular some of this horrendous bullying behaviour that's going on at the moment, which is being filmed and shared far and wide on social media, wrecking the lives of children, and I suspect their broader families as well. Whose responsibility is it? Where does the buck stop? I say you, the parent. What says you? See you in 2.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Hello, I'm Calvin Robinson. Do not miss my Common Sense Crusade Saturdays at 7 p.m. Join me for some in-depth discussions on faith. Is that not the start of the slippery slope?
It's very much so.
And the big moral questions of the day. I'm baffled.
You've got some nerve.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Kevin Craig is the former Labour councillor and the CEO of communications company PLMR. And Ben Habib is the CEO of First Property Group and a former Brexit Party MEP. I can tell you now, that conversation between these two about Northern Ireland continued into the break. Lots of varying opinions coming in from you guys at home. Jackie, she just says, Michelle, of course, Sinn Féin leaders should be invited to the coronation. Northern Ireland is part of the UK, whatever anyone thinks, and Sinn Féin are the ruling party. Can you move on, Michelle, and just encourage a brighter future? There you go. I can tell you that is one of the most responded to topics that I've done tonight. But I will move on just for time reasons because there has been a horrendous spike in young people recording attacks. Basically, when people they're just doing horrendous things to other children, uploading the footage on social media. I will not be showing any of these videos because they break my heart, quite frankly, and I don't want to publish them. This is a thing that sickens me, Ben. You know, everyone, yes, I know fighting went on when, you know, people were younger and all the rest of it, but this is a different level. And the recording of this, the sharing far and wide, what this must be doing to those child victims and also the families of these victims, it doesn't bear thinking about to me. And I look and I think, how can you stop this? How can you stop it? And one of the only ways that I can think of is make parents more accountable for their just a feral, disgusting child's behaviour, because it's like animalistic when I've looked at some of this stuff, and I've got to stop looking at it. I've stopped looking at it these days because it upsets me too much. I would like to see these parents facing charges.
Well, the presumption when I grew up was that parents were responsible for their children. That was the presumption. That was the time, of course, where the state hadn't intervened in virtually every aspect of our lives. But, of course, what we've seen over the last 40 years is an increasingly interventionist state. And we saw it, I think, as far as this topic is concerned, in complete evidence in the last budget, where Jeremy Hunt made childcare available for mothers with children as young as 9 months. So what they've been encouraging, effectively, is for mothers to go out and work, for the familial unit to be broken up, and for the state to look after the child. That's the direction of travel that, you know, we've been on as a country.
But that's a cop-out, though, because I've worked full-time since my son was 6 months old.
Yeah.
That does
and
not,
some
that
people
does not
manage it,
eliminate me from responsibility for my kids.
Absolutely right. And we've got to turn that pendulum right back, and parents need to understand that they need to be responsible. Whether or not you fine parents or you charge them or whatever it is that you would need to do in order to bring them to account. Now, that's another bit of state action. So, I'm not completely clear in my own head how I would tackle it. But somehow the state needs to get out of bringing children up. Parents need to take more responsibility for it. And certainly parents should not be encouraged to give up their children to the state and just assume and abrogate that responsibility. There's got to be responsibility.
It's laziness anyway. I think so many parents are lazy. You have kids. Honestly, I get so annoyed. I could spend a whole hour doing this subject matter work. You have kids going to nurseries, to schools, to primary schools. They're not even toilet trained. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. Obviously, I mean, I'm not talking about children with disabilities. I'm talking about healthy children whose parents just can't even be bothered.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all feel the outrage that you articulated earlier about some of these incidents with the behaviour of the young people and them sharing. Number one, there's no excuse for tech platforms allowing this stuff to be shared. That needs to be clamped down on, and it can be. The issue about the state trying to encourage and grab responsibility for children, I think the direction of policy in this country has been more about if women want to go to work, how can we make it easier for them? And the other thing is, which I don't have the answer for, is how can we get bad parents to be better? What are the mechanisms to do that? Because not everybody's lucky to have one or two parents who care and love them and bring them up well, like we were and many viewers and listeners. And the answer to that, Michelle, I'm not sure if fining chaotic, ill-equipped parents who are already failing is the answer. Schools need to be empowered to do more. We've had massive cuts to youth services across the country. There's less for kids to do. But ultimately, will fining these parents, will it change, or will they just ignore the fines? They don't care.
Well, fining parents stops out all these parents taking their kids out of school on holidays in term time. Paddy says, Michelle, he thinks I'm being quite harsh. He says, we brought our daughter up with love and care, ticked all your boxes, but once they get to teenager, they don't stand a chance. That's what he says. Deborah says, in capitals, yes, make them responsible for their children. What about Paddy's view there, which is when they get to teenage, they have a mind of their own? Anyway, gents, look, the time flew. You managed not to kill each other.
That may yet happen.
Yeah, I didn't have to get my ring cards out, which I very much appreciate. I'm a bit too old to be a ring girl. If you just tuned in, you missed a fantastic debate. Go back and watch it up. But for now, I say farewell. Nigel Farage is next.
Evening, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update. A bit of a wet one out there at the moment, and that'll lead to a fairly dull start tomorrow, but it should cheer up as we go through the day, and for many, it'll start to feel quite a bit warmer. But right now we've got a couple of areas of low pressure, a big one out in the Atlantic driving this smaller one across the country. It's been providing outbreaks of rain for many already today, and that rain becoming more extensive through this evening, spreading into northern England, southern Scotland, turning a little drier perhaps across southernmost counties of England. But for most it's a pretty damp night, a cloudy night, a breezy night in places. But it won't be as cold as recent nights, temperatures mostly holding up at 6 or 7 and double figures across the south. On to Friday, and it does start pretty dull and for many pretty damp, but generally dry conditions across the south, and it should cheer up, should get a bit brighter through the day, certainly for parts of Wales, southwest England by lunchtime, and then western Scotland, southern England, and eventually parts of the Midlands, likely to see some fleeting glimpses of sunshine. Eastern areas always staying fairly glum and quite cold. Northern Ireland brightening up with the potential for some heavy showers. In the south, well, we could see temperatures up to 90, maybe even 20 Celsius, where we get some blue sky. The clouds and the outbreaks of rain will continue to fritter away to the east during Friday evening, so most places start the weekend dry. Going to be a bit of a messy one this weekend. There'll be cloud and rain at times for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland on Saturday, and then some heavy showers breaking out in the afternoon, parts of Wales, the Midlands, Northern Ireland, but mostly dry in northern Scotland, southern and eastern England, largely dry on Saturday as well. And again, where we see some sunshine, warmer than it has been, 20 degrees, where it stays dull, only 11 or 12. The mixed picture continues through this weekend, warmer than this week. There will be dry and bright periods, but there'll be some heavy showers as well. Goodbye.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.